Hi, remember this guy? Elvis Presley. I'm going to bring you a glimpse of what made Elvis Elvis. Hello, this is Sahara, and I am with FYI Sahara YouTube. And if you were a child of the early 50s, raised on Glenn Miller and Lawrence Welk, if you saw this young fellow hop out on your Ed Sullivan TV show, what would you think? It was kind of amazing. It was actually a revolution, a rock and roll revolution. And what made this young man from a poor family from Mississippi reach a fame level like he did? And for a closer look as to what made him such a phenomenon, let's look up. If you ever want to know anything about your life, look up to the stars. They will guide you. He is. Oh, I have to show you some pictures of him when he was young, but don't let me forget. He had Sagittarius rising. That's normally a lucky. Sagittarius and Leo and sometimes Aries are naturally lucky right off. And he was a Capricorn. He doesn't act like a Capricorn the way he was taken off on the screen like that, but he was a very serious fellow. As a matter of fact, he had quite a spiritual inclination. He even went to Yogananda, the great guru in California, to become a disciple. But uh, Hollywood pulled him away. But what made him search so deep? He was born very poor in the deep South, and uh, part of the stigma that happened to him when he was very young, his father got sent to jail on a phony charge, and of course that's very traumatizing for a young man. I will hope to show you some of the midpoints that made his chart stand out. It would be interesting for you as well to see if you have any of these combinations. And his life story, of course, is fascinating. He did not come into this earth plane to lead a normal life. He is a Capricorn. They're very serious people. Yogananda was a Capricorn too. They had similar, sun signs. And but if you want to know where your money is or where anybody's money is, what makes these people stand out that is different from ordinary folks? They look like they have ordinary lives, but they don't. It's a star-crossed combination. Look to the ruler of the second house. That's the money house. And you have Capricorn on the second house cusp. And the eighth house is your money house as well as other people's money. And so if you have these two combinations meet up in your chart, either by progression or when you're born, you're going to have a great wealth. So you have the ruler of the eighth house is Cancer. The ruler of the um, second house is Capricorn. And how do these two planets come together? They come together in the third house, and Saturn, ruler of the second house, and the moon, ruler of the second house, the eighth house. They come together. Once they're combined, that brings those two things together, and it shows a great wealth. However, there's one more thing adding into this combination. Um, Saturn is 25 degrees of Aquarius, and the moon is at 2 degrees of Pisces, if you could see the aspects here. And you want to tie them together, and they're kind of far apart for a conjunction. 0 of Pisces and 25 of 25 of Saturn. Well, yes, here it is, 25. How do these two things, they're not quite close enough together. They're about 7 degrees apart. You want them, the way that they join up, believe it or not, is with Venus. Venus is running. Venus is all the things that we want in life, the little goodies, the popularity, the money, the fame, etc. So when you look at the Venus at 29 degrees of Capricorn, you see if you were to put your finger right in the middle of these two, 25 and 2, if you would put Venus here at the same degree, when things fall into the same degree, they start to interact. And that puts Venus at the midpoint of um, Saturn and the Moon. So that's how you see where there's going to be great wealth and fame. But that's not all with this young man. Um, he has a one thing you're probably familiar with is T-squares and oppositions, how they interplay with each other. And all these planets, when you start seeing things at the same degrees, if you run your finger down and you look at the degrees, Venus, 29 of Capricorn, Pluto, 25 of Cancer, that's an opposition. Then you look at 27 of Aries, Uranus, they're all lined up. Venus, Uranus, and Pluto. They're all in a big T-square that makes them all interact. So you can see that's exactly what a midpoint is, that Uranus is at the midpoint. If you were to take these two things and add them together, you would have this midpoint of 27 degrees of Aries. So we're used to seeing these obvious patterns where things do fall into midpoint. I guess midpoint, they interplay with each other. You have here Venus sitting over here minding some business, and here it is in a magnetic T-square with Uranus and Pluto. And the midpoint between Saturn and the Moon, 25 degrees of Aquarius and 2 degrees of Pisces. Venus, if you were to put Venus here, they're all at the same degree. And when you start seeing things at the same degree, you've got to know that they're all interacting a little bit. And that's where the combination of stellar influences comes into play. So you have a really, you're going to look at some other things that are all the same degree. Let's look at things that are similar. Mars and Neptune. Mars at 12 of Libra and Neptune at 4 of Virgo. Now you might not think, gee whiz, they're kind of far apart. They're not doing anything with each other. Oh, yes, they are. That's the fun thing about astrology. You have the midheaven is 28 of Virgo. The midpoint between Mars and Neptune is 28 of Virgo. So that all of a sudden makes that very powerful. If you look up Reinhold everything and see what the combination is. And Mars and Neptune is always drugs, alcohol. I'm trying to think. What this means is somehow drugs and alcohol play into a violent combination because it's at the midpoint. Where's he headed? He's headed towards Mars and Neptune because they're both aspected at 28 degrees of Virgo. And when those two things led to his death. So, and he, sadly, he died at 42 he was the king and he died on the throne. He died on the toilet. So they say the king died on the throne. And so all the popularity and money in the world can't help you if you're addicted to things. And this is addiction. Mars, Neptune, on midheaven or any other point, even if Venus were here or some other planet, the midpoint will tie these two things together. It actually meets in the middle. And when I look at the Aberdeen book, it reads, sick people or a craving for drugs and alcohol. So this does tie that into the way he's going. The midheaven is where you're going. See, let's see what this says. Um, so when you add these together, this shows that that was his fate. That's where he was headed. Now let's look at some other combinations that make this a very powerful chart. You've seen how the ruler of the eighth house, other people's money, and the ruler of the native's house is Capricorn, and they're joined together in the third house. And they're also kind of, if you think of glue, this kind of seals it when you put Venus in the middle there. And that's what you do when you look at things. You look to see where things are the same. Venus 29 of Capricorn, um, Saturn 25 of Aquarius, and let's see, Jupiter, Neptune, and the Moon at 2 of Pisces. That if you were to put the Venus right in between the two of them, they're the same point. The same. If it's sometimes astrology is all math, and that's what makes the combination of stellar influences so interesting. And when you start seeing things together, like Mars at 12 of Libra and Neptune 14 of Virgo, and then the midpoint is 28 of Virgo, and that's 28 of Virgo is these two things together. You have that's where your fate is. That's where you're headed. Stay away from. Just say no to drugs, and don't join the Navy. So, um, there's another very interesting combination here that makes Elvis Elvis is you're looking once again at things with similar aspects. The sun at 17 degrees of Capricorn, the ascendant, I don't have it listed here, but the ascendant is 12 degrees of Sagittarius, and the sun, Sagittarius, and who else but the great beneficent Jupiter. And when the ascendant is at the midpoint of these two, you can see easily that the sun and Jupiter are sextile. That's lucky right there when the Jupiter is in a good aspect to the sun. But when you add in the 12 degrees of Sagittarius, which is basically the same thing, Jupiter, um, Sagittarius, and the sun, the this is at the midpoint. If you were to do the math and divide this by 2, Jupiter plus the moon divided by 2, I mean, sorry, the sun divided by 2 equals the ascendant. It doesn't get better than that. And he had, let's see some more interesting things about Elvis. You think of him as this guy with jet black hair. He was the epitome of the rockabilly Billy movement. He didn't have jet black hair. This is a picture of him when he was a little boy, and he made his wife. He married, I believe her name was Priscilla Presley. Has a nice ring to it. He married her, she was 15. Only in the deep south can you pull off stuff like that, child marriages. And he made her dye her hair. I do have some pictures of Lisa Marie with the jet black hair. Her hair was naturally a light brown. And so they ran around. I guess this was part of the rockabilly persona with the jet black hair. And it's just interesting. Elvis had Um, he was an artist from the beginning, which didn't work for his early environment. You had early 50s, deep south, and he would go to school with silk shirts on, and he got beat up all the time. He was bullied terribly, but I guess he showed them all with his amazing talent. Oh, and before I go, I want to show you something interesting about Pisces people. He had a Pisces moon. Pisces are these dreamy characters, and they look like they're always looking at something on the horizon. Big, beautiful eyes, and he was noted for these dreamy eyes. And Pisces people do. Pisces rising, Pisces sun, and especially a Pisces moon. So you can see how the interplay between the rulers of our two money houses make a difference in our overall fame and fortune aspects. The ruler of the eighth house of the people's money and the ruler of the um, second house, Saturn, these two are together. And they're kind of glued together. I think of it as a gentle kiss. If you put um, Venus here, if and you were to read it as such, and of course the dynamics of this man's um, I guess overall horoscope showed the deep spirituality. Oh, by the way, that's how he really got started. He would go to what was called in the deep south all night sings, SINGS, where you go and sing praise songs. And he really his heart was in gospel music, and that played a big part. That his spirituality kind of was a springboard to the rock and roll fame. But he loved. He would go. He would hang out with the black folks in Mississippi and go to all night sings. I've been to them. You go to a big tent and you sing praise songs. You can't beat that gospel music. So you have that deep spirituality from the south, and that's Pisces too. And he was out. He was looking for Yogananda and his spiritual path, but Hollywood pulled him away. Um, More like Las Vegas. Big difference between hanging out with the guru in California or being in Las Vegas most of your life. And he chose I guess, a darker path as he could have been hanging out with Yogananda all of his life, or at these spiritualist things, SINGS. And if you ever get in the South and they're having those kinds of things, you will really enjoy the praise music. And that is a side of this rockabilly character that we've never saw, but it was there. I think a lot of his gospel albums did make it big with the music, but of course his rockabilly style was his overall thing. This chart also shows a lot about his daughter, his parents, and his path to fame and fortune, and what he did with it. Next, I'm going to do a whole series of Where's My Money? Or Money, Where's My Money? I think next I will do Queen Elizabeth. Interesting young woman. She's hanging out off on the side curtains of the life, side stage of life, and strange circumstances set her in front of the world stage during World War II. And of course, uh, the royal family is kind of, you're not hurting for money. And it shows in her chart she was destined, she was like a daughter of, I'm sorry, a niece of um, King Edward, I guess. And they had an interesting past, but one and the other was taken out of the picture, and she was um, a queen, and that's been her whole life. So look at her chart, and I have some other exciting charts of people. They have unusual amounts of fame and fortune, and it shows in their chart. Sometimes you're just a poor average person walking along, and you don't know that you've got maybe progressed Jupiter, ruler of your second house, coming up to your ascendant. That's like cha-ching. You've made it. You don't ever have to worry about things again. And you know what? Take a lesson from Elvis Presley. He wanted to walk a spiritual path, to hang out with the gospel people in Mississippi or the guru in California and India. And he chose Las Vegas and drugs. Think about that. Think about what you do with your fame and fortune. And I think next I have some exciting people I want to bring. Oh, Princess Diana. How did she end up? She was just more or less average. She was a lady. She had a title, but she was more or less average. And how did she end up being kind of princess to the world? Um, and the royal family does show these aspects over and over where they're just hanging out and kaboom, it happens. What are you going to do with it? And that's always the question. Just say no to drugs in Elvis Presley's chart and say hello to the guru or the spiritual inclination. It's always a choice for us all. I bid you adieu. There's always more up in the sky. And thank you for your suggestions of people to look at. Richard Barnican, insanely wealthy. There's some other people that you kind of curious. How did that happen to them? Were they lucky? Were they smart? Lucky and smart. Smart people don't always walk into these amazing situations. Sometimes it's fate. I leave that with you. This is Sahara with FYI Sahara YouTube. Like and subscribe so that you can find out where your money is.